My husband laughed when I told him I was filing for divorce. Not a nervous laugh, not disbelief. A real, confident laugh, like I'd just told a joke he'd heard 100 times before. You can't divorce me, he said, leaning against the kitchen counter like he owned the room. My dad owns this town. The words landed heavy, not because they were new, but because they were familiar. I'd heard versions of that sentence for years. Different tones, different moments, same message. I slid the papers across the counter anyway. He didn't even look at them at first. Just smirked, rolled his eyes, took a sip of coffee like this was all an inconvenience interrupting his morning. Good luck finding a lawyer who'll touch this, he added. You really think anyone here would go against my family? I watched his smile fade slowly as he picked up the papers and scanned the first page. Already filed, already served. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wasn't as steady anymore. When his eyes hit the lawyer's name, his shoulders relaxed. A little laugh escaped him. Thompson, he scoffed. That's it? Third rate. My dad will crush him. I met his eyes. Maybe he would have, I said quietly, if he weren't under federal indictment. The room went still. What? Wire fraud? Securities violations? All assets frozen. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost unsettling, like someone had flipped a switch and shut the power off behind his eyes. You're lying, he whispered. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the counter this time. The headline was still warm. 6 hours old. Local business titan under federal investigation. Assets seized pending trial. He stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen again, like if he looked hard enough, reality would blink first. This doesn't change anything, he said too quickly. He'll fix this. He can't even afford his own legal defense, I replied. The court appointed him a public defender this afternoon. His hands started shaking. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. What I felt was something colder. Relief. Because for the first time since we got married, the protection was gone. And so was I. We didn't start out like this. That's the part people never believe. That once, long before money became a weapon and power replaced affection, there was something real between us. I met him 6 years ago at a friend's engagement party. I remember the room more than the people. Warm lights, cheap champagne, laughter bouncing off walls that had seen too many celebrations. He stood near the bar, sleeves rolled up, relaxed in a way that drew attention without demanding it. We talked for hours that night, not about money, not about status, about work, about travel, about stupid childhood stories that made us laugh until our sides hurt. He told me about his family. Like it was a fact of life, not a crown. His father was successful, influential, respected. I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people have wealthy parents. That doesn't define who they are. Or so I thought. Dating him felt easy, effortless. He was charming, attentive, generous in the beginning. The kind of man who remembered small details, how I took my coffee, which songs I played on repeat, the way I always double-checked locks before bed. He made me feel seen. When he proposed 3 years later, it was grand but calculated, a ring that sparkled a little too brightly, a dinner with his parents already arranged before I'd even said yes. Everyone smiling like this outcome had been decided long before the question was asked. I told myself that was normal. Families get excited. The wedding was beautiful, expensive, polished, flawless in all the ways that look good in photos. His father paid for everything, every detail approved, every vendor chosen. I remember standing in my dress, looking at myself in the mirror, feeling a strange pressure in my chest that I couldn't name. I ignored it. A month after the wedding, the first shift happened. You'll work for my dad, my husband told me casually one night, like he was suggesting a restaurant for dinner. He's setting up a position for you. I already had a job, a good one. Engineering, 6 figures, work I was proud of. This pays better, he said, and it's family. I should have pushed harder. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I trusted him. The job wasn't what I'd expected. It wasn't engineering, it was errands. Scheduling, waiting, standing quietly in rooms where decisions were made without me. Fetching coffee while my degree collected dust. It's temporary, my husband kept saying. Just until Dad sees you're reliable. 3 years passed. Temporary became permanent. What changed faster than the job was my husband. Requests became expectations. Expectations became orders. If I asked for help around the house, I was reminded where my paycheck came from. You work for my family, he'd say, which means you work for me. If I pushed back even gently, he'd smile. That same confident smile from the kitchen. and mention his father. I'll talk to Dad about your attitude. I learned to choose silence. At family dinners, jokes were made at my expense. Subtle at first, then sharper. Comments about how lucky I was, how grateful I should be, how without them I'd be nothing special. And my husband laughed. That laughter chipped away at something inside me, slowly, methodically, until one night at his parents' dinner table, when his father joked about how fortunate I was to marry into real success, my husband laughed again, loudest of all. Something in me snapped. Not anger. Clarity. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a partner. I was property. After that dinner, I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. The way my husband corrected me in front of other people, always with a smile, always framed as a joke. The way his parents spoke about me instead of to me. The way decisions about our life were made in rooms I wasn't invited into, then presented to me as fates accompli. At first, I told myself I was being sensitive. Marriage takes adjustment. Families are complicated. Money complicates everything. But the unease didn't fade. It sharpened. One night, I asked him something simple. Can you pick up groceries on your way home? He didn't even look up from his phone. That's not my job. I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. I work too, he continued. You work for my family, which means you work for me. Go get groceries. The words sat between us, heavy and unmovable. When I didn't move right away, he finally looked up. Don't make this a thing, he said calmly. You know how this works. I did. That was the problem. The threats were never loud, never dramatic. They were casual, conversational, the most dangerous kind. I'll talk to Dad. He won't like that. Life can get complicated when you forget where you stand. I started paying attention after that, not because I was planning anything, not yet, but because something in me needed proof that I wasn't imagining this. At work, I noticed how people treated me, how conversations stopped when I walked into rooms, how emails weren't copied to me anymore, how I was praised publicly for loyalty, but never for skill. At home, I noticed how my husband stopped asking and started instructing, how my opinions were met with patience, not respect, the way you tolerate a child's tantrum. At his parents' house, it was worse. His father once clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're lucky. A lot of people would kill for the life we gave you." Gave. Not built, not shared. Given. My husband smiled like that was a compliment. I tried once to talk to him about it. Really talk. I don't feel like you're equal, I said quietly one night. I feel like I belong to your family more than I belong to myself. He sighed, like I was exhausting. You're overthinking, he replied. This is how successful families work. I didn't marry your father, I said. No, he answered. You married into him. That sentence stayed with me. I started pulling my bank statements, reading emails more carefully, listening when people forgot I was in the room. Not because I was scheming, but because something inside me knew I needed to understand the world I was trapped in before it swallowed me whole. Then came the comment at dinner. His father joked about how lucky I was to marry up. My husband laughed. Not nervously, not politely, proudly. I set my fork down and said calmly, I was an engineer making 6 figures before this, doing real work. The silence was immediate. My husband's voice turned cold. You're done when I say you're done, he said. Or would you like to find out how hard life gets when my father makes a few phone calls? That was the moment the marriage ended. Not on paper, not legally, but in my chest. The next day I called Thompson. Thompson didn't look like the kind of lawyer my husband's family feared. His office was small, practical, no sweeping views of the city, no plaques announcing powerful friends, just stacks of files, a legal pad filled with handwritten notes, and a man who listened without interrupting. I won't lie to you, he said after I finished explaining everything. With your husband's family connections, this could get ugly. They'll drag it out, try to intimidate you, maybe even try to destroy your career. I took a slow breath. My hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. What if those connections disappeared? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. Then it's a different case. They will, I said. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. But 2 weeks earlier, a friend of mine, someone who worked in the federal courthouse, had pulled me aside after lunch. Off the record, he had said quietly, your father-in-law is in serious trouble, federal-level trouble, sealed indictment, fraud, securities violations, years in the making. I'd felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. I didn't know when it would happen. I didn't know how bad it would be. I just knew the protection my husband relied on wasn't as solid as he believed. So I waited. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal. 2 weeks of watching my husband walk through rooms like he owned the air itself. 2 weeks of listening to him talk about expanding influence, about renewal vows, about throwing a big party to remind everyone who we were. We should renew our vows, he said one Saturday morning. Big event. Invite everyone. Show them we're a power couple. I smiled and nodded. Sounds great. Monday morning, the news broke. Federal agents raided my father-in-law's office. Accounts frozen. Assets seized. Bail denied. Tuesday morning, I filed for divorce. And now we were standing in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd cooked dinners alone, where I'd been ordered to grocery shop like an employee, with divorce papers between us and his entire world collapsing in real time. This is insane, my husband said finally, pacing. You can't just, we're married. Not for long. I'll fight this, he snapped. I'll take everything. The house, the cars, your pension. I tilted my head slightly. Good luck affording a lawyer. That stopped him. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He never had to. His father had always paid. For everything. I'll max out the cards, he said suddenly, before they freeze them. They already are. He lunged for his wallet, pulling out cards, typing numbers into his phone with shaking fingers. Declined. 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 No. You have about $300 in your personal checking account, I said quietly. That's it. How do you know that? You show me your statements every month, I replied, to prove you're being responsible with your allowance. The word hung between us. Allowance. For the first time, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Who are you? He asked. I met his eyes without flinching. Someone who got tired of being treated like garbage. He backed away slowly, as if I'd just revealed something dangerous. In a way, I had. Because what he didn't understand, what none of them ever did, was that the moment their power cracked, everything they'd built on top of it started to collapse. And I wasn't going to stop it. The shock didn't last long. It never does with people who have always believed the world bends for them. By that evening, my husband had moved from disbelief to fury, the kind that buzzes just under the skin, sharp and unstable. You planned this, he accused, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You knew about my dad. You waited. I knew there was an investigation, I said evenly. I didn't know when they'd move. Liar. His voice cracked, not with sadness, with rage. You set this up. You watched us fall and waited like a vulture. I folded my arms, feeling my heartbeat settle instead of spike. That surprised me. Your father set this up himself, I said, by committing fraud for 15 years. He didn't do anything wrong, he snapped. It's a misunderstanding. The denial was almost impressive. That night, he called his mother. I could hear her voice through the phone, high, frantic, already rehearsed. An hour later, my phone rang. How dare you do this now, she demanded without greeting. Your father-in-law is facing serious charges and you're worried about your feelings? My feelings include 3 years of being treated like hired help, I replied. He gave me a job. He didn't give me dignity. He took you in. I'm a grown woman with a master's degree. I didn't need taking in. I needed a partner. There was a pause, the kind where someone recalculates their angle. My son is too good for you anyway, she said finally. You were lucky he married you. She hung up. My husband watched me from across the room, jaw tight. See, he said. This is what you're doing, tearing the family apart. No, I replied quietly. I'm stepping out of it. By Wednesday, the accusations escalated. You knew about my dad and waited, he repeated, like saying it often enough would turn it into truth. You're heartless. On the news, former investors were coming forward. Employees talked about shredded documents, frozen accounts, seized properties. Still, he insisted it was temporary. The government's jealous of successful people, he said, pacing again. They'll fix this. Successful people don't steal pension funds, I answered. He didn't respond. Thursday morning, I got a call from my old engineering firm. Hey, my former boss said carefully. Got a strange call from your husband. He said you've been making threats and acting unstable. I closed my eyes for a second, just a second. We're getting divorced, I explained. He's not handling it well. That explains it, he sighed. He also said you were stealing from the company before you left. I quit 3 years ago, I said, to work for his family. I never stole anything. Yeah, he replied. Figured. Just wanted to give you a heads up. He's making calls. Poisoning the well. A classic move. It wouldn't work there. I'd left on good terms, but the intent was clear. That evening, my husband confronted me again. You think you're smarter than us, he said. You think this ends well for you? I think it ends honestly, I replied. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but I won't regret staying. That night, I packed a bag. I moved out the next morning. A studio across town. Nothing fancy. Bare walls. Cheap furniture. But it was mine. And when I locked the door behind me for the first time, my hands shook. Not from fear. From relief. Relief didn't last. It never does when someone who's lost control decides they're entitled to take it back. The first time my husband showed up at my new apartment, it was just after sunset. I was standing in the tiny kitchen, staring at a single mug drying on the counter when the knock came, sharp, impatient, already angry. "I know you're in there," he called. I didn't answer. The knock turned into pounding. "Open the door. We need to talk." "We can talk through our lawyers," I said through the door. My voice surprised me, steady even. "Stop being childish." "This isn't your home," I replied. "Go home." "This is my home," he snapped. "You stole it from me." I rested my forehead against the door, eyes closed. "The apartment was mine before we got married," I said. "My name only. Check the lease." Silence, then anger again. "I'm not leaving until you listen to me." A neighbor's door opened down the hall. Someone muttered something about noise. Building management emailed me an hour later. I forwarded the message to Thompson. The second visit came 2 days later. The third, the next morning. Each time, louder, more desperate, less controlled. I documented everything. Dates, times, screenshots, doorbell footage. Thompson's advice echoed in my head. Let her keep going. She's building your case for you. Then came Monday morning. I was driving to work when red and blue lights filled my rearview mirror. "License and registration," the officer said politely. I handed them over, confused but calm. He walked back to his car. 15 minutes passed. When he returned, there were 2 more officers with him. "Step out of the vehicle, please." My stomach tightened, not with fear, but recognition. "What's going on?" I asked. "We received a report that you've been making threats," he said. "We need to ask you a few questions." "Of course." He filed a police report, I said evenly, claiming I've been harassing him. The officers exchanged a glance. "I haven't contacted him except through my lawyer," I continued. "He's the one showing up at my residence." "Can you prove that?" I smiled thinly. "Actually, yes." I pulled up the doorbell footage, time-stamped, clear audio, him yelling, me telling him to leave. Multiple days, multiple attempts. The officers watched in silence. One sighed. "Looks like someone wasted our time," he muttered. They let me go with an apology, but the damage had been done. When I arrived at work, HR asked to see me. "We received some concerning information," the representative said gently. "An anonymous call claimed you were making threats in the workplace." I didn't argue. I didn't panic. I showed her everything. Police body cam footage, doorbell videos, a written timeline. She watched, expression tightening. "I'm going to recommend we ignore this complaint," she said finally, "but document everything. If this escalates, we need to know." It escalated. 2 days later, one of my clients called me directly. "Got a weird call," he said. "Someone claiming to be your husband. Said he was worried about your mental state, about the quality of your work." My jaw clenched. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," I said. "We're getting divorced. He's making false reports." "Figured," he replied. "We're happy with your work. But heads up, he might call others." He did. 3 more clients. 2 ignored him. 1 didn't. A $15,000 contract vanished overnight. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not anger. Resolve. I called Thompson. "He's interfering with my livelihood," I said. "What do we do?" "We file for a restraining order," he replied, "and we document everything." The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, my husband found new ways to hurt me. He emptied our joint savings account. $8,000. Gone. He hired movers while I was at work and cleaned out the apartment. Furniture, kitchenware, even the toilet paper. I came home to bare floors and echoing walls. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so deliberate. Every stunt, every lie, every act of pettiness went into Thompson's file. "Let him keep going," Thompson said calmly. "He's making this very easy." By the time the restraining order hearing arrived, my husband wasn't just angry. He was unraveling, and everyone could see it. The night before the restraining order hearing, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared of losing, but because I was finally letting myself feel the weight of everything I'd been carrying for years. The apartment was still mostly empty. A mattress on the floor, a folding chair by the window, the hum of traffic outside filling the silence I'd been avoiding. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at my hands. They were steady. That felt strange. I thought I'd be shaking by now, crying, panicking. That's what I'd been trained to do whenever conflict arose. Soften, soothe, apologize, minimize. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. Deep, bone level. 3 years of being watched, measured, managed. 3 years of smiling through humiliation. 3 years of being told I was lucky, grateful, replaceable. And now, when I finally stepped away, the punishment came fast and relentless. I checked my phone. Missed calls, voicemails, emails forwarded by Thompson, threats disguised as pleas, pleas disguised as love. We can fix this. You're destroying everything. You owe me a conversation. You're heartless. I deleted them one by one. Still, doubt crept in. What if the judge didn't see it? What if this really did drag on forever? What if I'd underestimated how far he'd go? My mind replayed the traffic stop, the officers' faces, the way suspicion lingered even after proof, the HR meeting, the lost contract, the empty apartment. This was the cost of leaving. Not freedom. Not immediately. The cost was being painted as the villain for refusing to stay small. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to. I knew the tone, the pattern, the arc. First anger, then blame, then desperation. I lay back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since filing, a crack formed in my resolve. Not enough to break me, but enough to hurt. Was this worth it? I thought of the dinner table, his father's laugh, my husband's pride. The threat delivered so casually it barely registered at the time. You're done when I say you're done. I sat up. No. The hearing room the next morning was small and quiet. No drama, no raised voices, just paperwork and tired eyes. My husband sat on the other side of the room with his father's criminal defense attorney. The man looked exhausted, like this case was a burden he hadn't planned for. When my husband saw me, his expression shifted. Not anger, not confidence. Fear. For the first time, he didn't look protected. The judge listened, interrupted when necessary, asked for evidence. Police reports, doorbell footage, client affidavits, building manager statements. Each piece landed like a stone. When my husband tried to speak, the judge stopped him. By filing false police reports? By harassing her at her residence and workplace? By interfering with her business? His lawyer tried to downplay it. Exaggerations. Emotional distress. A marriage worth saving. The judge wasn't buying it. Then my husband spoke. He abandoned me, he said, voice shaking. I have nowhere to go. No money. He took everything. I watched him carefully. These weren't the practiced tears I was used to. They were real. For a second, just a second, guilt pressed against my ribs. Then the judge looked at the filings. According to these records, she said, you've been unemployed for 6 years. I was supporting my spouse's career, he replied quickly. I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. The judge glanced at me, then back at him. The evidence suggests otherwise, she said. Temporary restraining order granted. The words settled over the room like quiet thunder. My husband's face collapsed. The safety net was gone. And standing there, watching it happen, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. This was the lowest point, and I was still standing. The restraining order changed everything. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, in the way gravity shifts when something massive finally gives way. My husband stood there, required to keep his distance, his lawyer whispering frantically at his side. The judge's words still hung in the air, firm and unmistakable. 500 feet, no contact. Immediate arrest for violations. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have a rebuttal. Outside the courthouse, he tried anyway. This isn't over, he hissed, staying just far enough away to avoid trouble. My dad's going to beat these charges. He's not, I said calmly. There are 17 witnesses lined up. He's going to prison. You don't know that. I've seen the evidence. That shut him up. That afternoon, Thompson called me into his office. Now we go on offense, he said, tapping a folder thick enough to warp the desk beneath it. Because here was the thing my husband never understood. When you spend 3 years being treated like invisible help, people forget you're listening. I'd seen emails, expense reports, conversations spoken freely in front of me because no one thought I mattered. I hadn't kept records out of spite. I'd kept them because something in me knew I might need them someday. I handed Thompson everything. Emails showing my husband bragging to friends about never having to work. Company charges for furniture and art used to decorate our apartment, billed as office renovations. Payroll records for a friend of his hired into a no-show job, paid for 18 months without ever stepping foot inside the building. Thompson read in silence. Then he smiled. Oh, this is good, he said. Very good. My husband was requesting spousal support, $4,000 a month, claiming he'd sacrificed his career to support mine. With this, that argument evaporated. The preliminary divorce hearing came faster than I expected. My husband showed up with a new lawyer. Young, nervous, clearly outmatched. The kind of attorney you hire when money is gone and options are limited. Your Honor, the lawyer began, my client has been out of the workforce for 6 years while supporting his spouse's career. Objection, Thompson said smoothly. The defendant chose not to work. There is no evidence of career sacrifice. The judge leaned forward. What career? She asked. Silence. Thompson presented the emails. My husband went pale. The judge read carefully, thoroughly. The room felt smaller with every passing second. Temporary spousal support is denied, she said finally. The defendant is advised to seek employment. I don't have job skills, my husband snapped. Then you'll acquire some, the judge replied. This court does not exist to maintain anyone's lifestyle. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Outside the courtroom, Thompson clapped me on the shoulder. That went very well, he said. With his behavior on record, this is shaping up to be a clean exit. Clean. The word felt unreal. But it was true. His father's trial was starting soon. The media was circling. The illusion of power was gone, stripped down to cold facts and legal consequences. And for the first time since I filed, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. Choosing distance, choosing clarity, choosing myself. The 90 days that followed the hearing were a slow-motion car crash for my husband family, and for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't in the passenger seat. I was a spectator, watching from the safety of the sidelines as the fire they had started consumed everything they touched. The federal trial for his father opened like a wound. Every night, the news was filled with the gritty details of the Vance empire, a house of cards built on the stolen pensions of honest workers and the systematic manipulation of local government. As the media tore into them, Elias's world didn't just shrink, it vanished. His friends, the men he'd played golf with and the women Lydia had hosted for tea, didn't just disappear. They acted as if they'd never known his family's name. The invitations stopped. The club memberships were revoked. The power couple brand Elias had been so obsessed with was now a radioactive label that no one wanted to touch. My husband himself was a wreck. Without his father's checkbook to fund his arrogance, he was forced to face the final divorce decree in a state of total collapse. At the final settlement hearing, the contrast was jarring. I walked in wearing a simple, tailored suit I'd bought with my own consulting fees. I had 2 new contracts with reputable engineering firms. I had my life back. Elias walked in looking haggard, wearing an off-the-rack suit that was 2 sizes too big. He'd clearly lost weight, and the frantic light in his eyes told me he was finally starting to understand the concept of consequences. The defendant has failed to return the $8,000 in marital funds as ordered, Thompson announced to the judge. Furthermore, the property he removed from the petitioner's residence was sold to an antique dealer for a fraction of its value. We are asking for a total judgment of $11,000 to cover the theft and damages. My husband's new lawyer, a kid barely out of law school who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table, tried to protest. Your Honor, my client has no income. His family assets are entirely seized. He is living with an aunt and working a retail job at a department store. He simply cannot pay. Then he will sign a payment plan, the judge ruled, her voice like iron. This court is not a charity for the formerly wealthy. Mr. Vance, you will pay the petitioner $200 a month for the next 5 years. Consider it a monthly reminder that marital property is not a personal piggy bank. My husband looked at me then. It wasn't a look of rage anymore. It was pure, pathetic defeat. You took everything, Eleanor. You're leaving me with nothing. I'm leaving you with exactly what you gave me for 6 years, I replied. Yourself. I hope you enjoy the company. The final blow came a week later. His father was found guilty on 14 counts of federal fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Lydia, who had signed off on the redecorating funds and several fraudulent loan documents, was charged as an accomplice and sentenced to 5. The big house, the cars, the crystal chandeliers, everything was seized by the government to be auctioned off for the victims of their fraud. I watched the news of the auction from my new drafting table. I saw the marble countertops being measured for removal. I saw the Bordeaux glasses Elias loved so much being sold in lots of 12. I received my first $200 check from Elias a few days later. It was folded inside a plain envelope with no note. I didn't spend it. I sat at my desk and filled out a donation form for a local nonprofit that helps victims of financial elder abuse, people exactly like the ones his father had cheated. I realized then that the luck my husband had mocked me for wasn't about marrying into money. It was the luck of getting out just as the foundation gave way. I had survived the collapse, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't building someone else's monument. I was building my own. The dust has finally settled. It's been 6 months since the gavel fell for the last time, and the silence in my life no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful. My new apartment isn't a palace. It's a high-rise studio with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city's industrial district. From here, I can see the cranes and the steel skeletons of buildings rising from the earth. I see progress. I see structural integrity. I spent 3 years being told that my value was decorative, that my brain was an attitude problem, and that my survival depended on the shadow of a powerful man. I believed it for a while. That's the danger of a gilded cage. The gold reflects so much light that you go blind to the fact that you're behind bars. I recently walked past the old Vance Holdings building. The logo had been scrubbed from the stone, leaving a faint, ghostly outline of what used to be. It's a perfect metaphor for Elias. Without the name, the money, and the borrowed power of his father, there isn't much left of him. I heard through the grapevine that he's still working that retail job, struggling to make his monthly payments to me. Every month, when that $200 hits my account, I immediately transfer it to the Fraud Victims Fund. I want no part of their legacy. I want no allowance from a ghost. This journey taught me a lesson that no engineering textbook ever could. The most expensive thing you can ever own is a life you didn't build yourself. When you let someone else provide your foundation, they own the rights to the roof over your head. They can take it away to spite you, or they can let it collapse because they were too arrogant to build it properly. I realized that my luck wasn't in marrying a millionaire. It was in the moment I lost everything and realized I still had the tools to rebuild. I'm back in the field now, wearing my hard hat and boots, standing in the mud of a new bridge project. My hands are often dirty, and my back often aches, but when I look at the blueprints, I see my own name in the signature block. I am no longer an errand girl or a brand ambassador. I am a woman who knows exactly how much weight a structure can bear before it breaks. I am Eleanor. I am an engineer, and for the first time in my life, I am the sole architect of my future. The view from the bottom wasn't a punishment, Elias. It was a vantage point. And from here, the only way to go is up.